Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on Online for Authors is Fran Hawthorne, author of the book I Meant to Tell You. Although she has been writing novels since she was 4 years old, she got sidetracked for several decades by journalism. I Meant to Tell You is a contemporary women's fiction with some forays into the history surrounding the demonstrations during the Vietnam War era. More importantly, it is about a woman named Miranda who must come to terms with her past, both the past she has tried to keep secret and the past that has been kept secret from her. Fran made me think about what I would do to keep my mistakes hidden from others, or what others might do if they found out about my skeletons. She also made me consider how I would handle learning about someone else's secrets, especially if those secrets were meaningful to me. Can love survive the past? And when is it okay to tell a few white lies to gloss over the details of the past? I Meant to Tell You may just have the answers.
Today in Online for Authors, we have Fran Hawthorne. She is the author of I Meant to Tell You. Welcome, Fran.
Oh, Terry, thank you so much for inviting me.
And
congratulations on the launch and changes in your show.
Oh, thank you so much. I am super excited to have you. You and I have been talking back and forth for some time now. I don't remember how we met. Did we meet LinkedIn?
We met via Instagram because we seem to have a mutual connection. And then we continued through LinkedIn until we finally actually started exchanging real emails.
Yeah.
You, in fact, wonderfully introduced me to a number of other podcasts. I don't know if I should say that.
That's good. That's excellent. The more the merrier. I mean, I think that when we can find ways as authors to get our voices out there, that's what we need to do. So I'm glad that I was able to help you do that.
You were. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. So before we get really into things, give our listeners just a quick overview of what is this book about? If you were to give us the little elevator pitch, what is this?
Oh, I should have had it ready. Well,
that's okay.
So Miranda and her fiance, Russ, it's very important to them to have a great cause to make the world better. And Russ thinks he's got his perfect job as an assistant U.S. attorney. He's going to be investigating business corruption. And they joke that as part of the FBI vetting, there might be a problem because her parents were anti-war activists in the 60s. But it turns out in the course of the FBI vetting, a different problem emerges. It turns out the FBI discovers that Miranda had been arrested for felony kidnapping 7 years earlier, a little detail she had never bothered to tell her fiancé about. In the course of figuring out what's going to happen to their relationship, Miranda starts uncovering more and more secrets about her family, about Russ, about her former best friend.
And it goes from there. Yeah. It was a very intriguing story.
Thank you.
Where did the idea come from?
Oh, okay. This is a long explanation. I apologize.
No, this is great. I'd love to hear the backstories of novels, because I know as an author, there's always some tale that brings us to a place where we now have a character or a story or a setting or something.
So it starts, okay, I have a large family, a number of wonderful cousins, a lot of them. And we talk about family stories. And so I was always grown up and told that, a great aunt of mine had never married, lived with her mother all her life because she was mentally ill. And this was back in Poland in the 30s. And then my cousins said, no, that's not true at all. Actually, she did get married and she had a kid. And then my mother said, well, actually, it wasn't that she was mentally ill. It's that she was divorced. When divorce was such a horrible scandal back then that it was considered more respectable to be mentally ill. And, so everybody had different family stories. And there's no way that we'll ever know the truth. The great aunt, my great grandmother, they were murdered in the Holocaust. And the next generation, my parents, right. I mean, they're gone. And so we'll never know. And it doesn't change my life, of course, one way or the other, what the truth is about my great aunt. But it just got me thinking about how family stories got passed down and the different versions. And when I would talk to other people, everybody, I mean, maybe you do too. You've got this story that you didn't know. And then it turns out grandpa had another wife and a whole different family. This one comes up a lot with Fred.
Right. Well, so the one in my family is my grandparents never celebrated their wedding anniversary. And they always talked about how my father was born 2 months premature. Except that he wasn't premature. He was an 8-pound baby. 8-pound babies are not premature by 2 months. And they didn't celebrate their wedding anniversary because when you counted, there wasn't 9 months between when they got married and when he was born. And they just kind of that's what they said. He was born premature. And then they just never brought it up again. And they went to their graves believing that. I'm not believing it, but like portraying that out to us, even though my dad knew the truth. Us kids knew. I mean, everybody knew, but you couldn't talk about it because it did not happen.
That, again, you hear that a lot too.
Yeah.
That turns out someone does a DNA test but the person they thought was their dad isn't their dad. Yeah, I mean, and
we have one of those in the family too.
So it just got me thinking. And so I came up with a 4-generation family saga that would be told in reverse chronological order. That would essentially start with Miranda and Russ, then go to Miranda's parents, the 60s activists, then Miranda's grandparents, and her great-grandparents. And I started writing it. I was completely overwhelmed. I had the 2 generations, Miranda and then her parents, and it's already 400 pages. Oh my God. And the research I would have to do, because I'm a former journalist and I do my research. I mean, in this book, there's a scene when Miranda and Russ walk across the Arlington Memorial Bridge in Washington, D.C., and then have a fight. And I walked across the bridge and I took notes on how high the fence comes and what the benches are made of, because if they're going to sit in a marble bench, it better be a marble bench. Anyway, so if that's the easy research, imagine going 4 different generations back 100 years. And, my agent said to me, Fran, why don't you just cut this in half and just do the first 2 generations or the 2 newest generations.
Right.
And I said, oh, wow,
that sure makes it easier.
And so there's, I know Miranda's grandparents and great-grandparents really well because I'd thought about them and mapped them out, which means I know Miranda, my main character, much better than, for example, I did in my first novel, because I know her family history like I know my own.
Right.
Most of us don't know our friends' family histories. And I think that helps make her a richer, fuller person, At any rate, that became, I have to do this book.
Right. I meant it too.
And I don't know, I might write the other 2 generations someday.
I was going to ask if you're still considering using that information that you started gathering.
I have just finished a different novel and started yet a different one. So not immediately would be my answer, but
you never know. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So let's go to the research aspect, because I tell everyone that I'm a research junkie, and I use that as a hashtag all the time, because it's one of the reasons I really love writing my historical fiction, is because I get to do 2 things I love: research and write. And I can get kind of stuck in rabbit holes and find all kinds of information I'm never going to use because, I've started diving in, right? What was your research like? Like, you talk a lot about the demonstrations and things that were going on in the 60s and early 70s. What kind of research did you have to do to come up with the realities of those demonstrations?
Yeah, I mean, I am younger than her parents. I wasn't, but I have been in some demonstrations. So some of it, when her mother advises what to do if there's tear gas, I mean, I remember getting that advice. Soak a handkerchief in vinegar, I think. But other than that, I did, depending on the research, in some cases, there's some scenes that take place in Columbia University in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So I went there, and I walked around and I took copious notes of what the sidewalks are made of and how many levels of stairs you climb up to, get to the top of this building where, speeches were taking place. I mean, I guess you said much more than I would ever need, but so that I'm comfortable describing the scene. And in addition, we have the internet.
Isn't that the most wonderful tool?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine doing some of what I'm doing right now without the internet. That would be so hard.
And I was lucky enough, for example, in searching the sit-in at Columbia, I found a picture of a flyer that was actually given out there. So I was able to quote from that flyer and describe it, so that was, and then to the degree possible, I interviewed not so much about the demonstrations, but there are other scenes that take place in a part of Brooklyn where Miranda's mother, Judith, is growing up, a part of Brooklyn called Flatbush. And so I interviewed people who had grown up there at the same time. And I mean, they told me the stores they went to and the buildings, what the insides of their apartments looked like and, all kinds of stuff. And then since I live not that far from there, I'm a runner. I go running every morning. And so I started doing morning runs along those streets with my little, with my phone, dictating, notes to myself. Okay, so you turn left here on, East 18th Street, and then you'll see these buildings, because the buildings are pre-war. They go back, before the
Right.
So that's just some of the different kinds of picayune.
Right. And so you kind of immerse yourself in it. And then you seem to do what I do, which is then pick out those details that are going to make your story move forward, because you can't use everything you find.
But I want to know more than I use. I did as a journalist, and I want to now. So that, exactly as I said, I can feel comfortable. And honestly, I went back to Columbia 3 times, despite all my notes. And it's easy. I live in New York City.
Right.
And I went back to Washington, D.C. twice. And I don't live there, although it's not that far from New York. Again, to take detailed notes, just exactly this metro station. So where are the stairs in relation to this? Because when he drops the flowers.
Right. Does it make sense?
I know somebody is going to find a mistake. I'm sure, I'm sorry.
Well, and that's what I tell people too. I said, I do a lot of research but I'm not a historian. And there may be an error. There may be something that I didn't catch because I didn't live it, but I do my best. And I try really hard to make sure that products that are being used actually existed. I have a scene in An Enemy Like Me where I have him putting Brill cream in his hair, and I wrote it. And then I thought, this is 1939. I know Brill cream was around after that. Was it around in 39? It was. And it became really popular in the mid 30s. So by 39, he would have had access to it. But those are the kinds of things that my mind stops and says, oh, maybe I need to put something else in his hair. What did they put in the hair before Brill cream? Well, let me find out if Brill cream even existed.
Oh, I know. I was going crazy trying to figure out. So a lot of the book is set in 2003. Well, wait. So were people really using laptops and bringing them home? Definitely people use computers at work, desktop. as we would call them back then. And okay, everybody had cell phones, but what about smartphones? And it's funny, 2003 is the modern era, but it's not.
It's not yet.
2023.
Exactly.
And
so there are differences, and you do have to, I've had people say to me, Terry, no one would ever know if Brylcreem was around. And I said, but I would.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be a reader who's going to call you out if you've made a mistake like that. You're going to have that reader. And I don't know, I feel like as someone who's writing fiction, but trying to do it in a historical setting, then I need to make my historical setting as accurate as I can. That's, my characters get to do what they want because they're fictional, but they have to do what they want within the confines of this setting that I've put them in. And I can't just pretend, you talk about Columbia University, and you can't just make something up. You can't put them at a building that doesn't exist, or have them standing on these tall stairs that aren't there.
Yeah. Or again, I had to find the timing of, there was a student takeover. It was a major action at Columbia. And what days, how many days did it last? When did the police come in? Yeah. All of that.
Right. Because if you're going to have your character involved, but not involved. So Miranda's mother is at that one, and she's involved, but she's not involved like gets arrested, and she's not involved like she's there for any of the big details. So you have to know, when would that have been, so that you can put her in and pull her back out again without too much problem, right?
Yeah. And then right. And right, the arrests that do occur in the book, and we're not going to go into details, I researched, and they based on real people who got arrested, and these were the actual charges,
right,
and these actual circumstances. I absolutely, and so I mean, it makes me feel good, so it's the fun part. And let's face it, at least for me, maybe not for you, researching is much easier than staring at a blank screen and writing.
Right. Well, and I love both of the processes. I have to sometimes remind myself, you've done enough research for now. Yeah. Start writing, and then
that's
and then like do research along the way. Like I try to do a lot of back end research, front end research before you really get started. But then I need to get writing, because I could research and use that as my excuse to never write.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm a very different. Okay. When I create the premise of my book, there's certain basic research that has to be done to make sure the premise works.
The premise is going to work, right?
Okay. But then I just start writing, and I have another page up on my screen, my laptop, that says research needed for chapter 1, and it's full of 3 pages long, researching, so that I'm not going to sometimes I will get slowed down into the rabbit hole that you said, and I'll start Googling and go, get back to your page. Yeah. So, because I don't need research, as you said, for my characters' personalities.
Exactly.
Their dialogue.
Exactly.
Well, dialogue, if it's historical, you have to make sure the slang is right, but you don't need that for the immediate emotions and interactions of the dialogue. So I just get it down. Then I go and do the research, and I do the research by topic, needless to say. You're not going to go back and forth, library, right. So I do it by topic. And as I insert the corrections into the book, that's a form of revision. Right. I'm not just changing a word, I'm changing paragraphs, So that's my first revision, is the insertion of the research.
Yeah, we do things a little differently. Yeah. I do a lot of research at the front. And then I tend to research, like I'm putting Brylcreem in his hair, and I stop right then. And it's like, I go and look that up. Or if I'm really on a roll, I don't have a document up. This is where I use a notebook and a pen, and I'm writing it out over here to the right. Write that up.
Your first draft you're writing, or your research needed?
The research that I'm needing, I'm writing on a notebook over to the side, like look up Brylcreem, or look up whatever, or find out. My problem is sometimes I'll come up with a solution, and I'll think, oh my gosh, I'm not even sure that can happen. And then I do have to stop.
Yeah, that's what I talk about, the basic stuff. I'm writing into that now with the book I'm writing now, my fourth novel. I may have to violate my rule. And see, then sometimes research involves talking to people, not like my friends who grew up in Brooklyn, but experts. And you usually get one shot at the expert. So that's why I like to save that till I have
to the end.
The whole draft. Yeah. I have all the questions for a particular expert. So that's the debate that's going in my head now in novel number 4. And so I'm still plugging ahead on the rough draft with the figuring that I may have to really drastically change a certain plot line, but I know enough to know that the basics will work. Anyway, but it is fun in the middle of writing a draft. Sometimes I've got to go. This will be a really quick Google search. I'm just going to do it. Sometimes I do that, and we need breaks, right?
Right.
At least I do.
Right.
So it's a break.
I've done that before where I've been looking for something and it's like, no, that isn't going to work. Oh man, what am I going to do? And then I'm still like looking through, trying to figure out, and all of a sudden I'll get a new fact. And that new fact is like, oh, that's my answer. I can use that instead. Yay. And then I go on. So I'm a bit of a pantser. So a lot of times I'm writing along and it's like, oh, I've just backed myself into a wall. I've got to figure out how to get out of here. You sound maybe like you're more of a planner.
Oh, yes and no.
Yes and no. So you're an in-betweener.
I cannot start a book without an outline. Okay. I do need that. And sometimes my outline for the chapter will be, I'm just trying to think, I don't think of an outline. I'm just trying to think outline. Russ and Miranda joke about her parents, and he says, "Oh, what you would tell me if there was anything," and she goes, "Yeah, right." Chapter 1. Okay, I can say that it's chapter 1. I mean, the book begins with a prologue, but that's all I've kind of said. That's what I know has to happen. That doesn't fill an entire chapter. Right. So there's plenty I have to fill in, but I need to know how the plot is moved along in each chapter, because I have to make sure that there's a logical progression, that I don't leave things out. Then what happens is that outline gets changed in the revisions, well, not even in the revisions, in the first draft. I mean, pantser, I've never heard that, but I like that. Seat of your pants. Pantser is just seat of your pants. It's that. The characters, for me, and I'm sure for you, because for every novelist, they have their own lives. They take on their own lives. They start talking. They start walking. I wasn't planning it. Let me see where it goes. Sometimes they walk into walls of their own volition. Right. Or they start walking and talking into a subplot I hadn't expected. All right, let me see if it works. Sometimes I tell people all the time that I have voices in my head, and they definitely are talking. And I have gotten to places before where I know where I want this book to go, and my characters do not want it to go there. Yeah. And they refuse to play with me. They just, and nothing is working. And I finally kind of let go of that and go where my characters are pushing me, and I find a much better thing than what I had in my mind. I had this thing, and my characters are standing over there going, no, we're not playing. We're not going there with you. I have to let them go where they want. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't work, and you roll them back, and then you go, okay, well, my original idea wasn't going to work. Their idea doesn't work. Okay, time for a coffee break. A research break. Exactly. But it's a collaboration. I just thought of that between my characters and me. Yeah. Neither of us is in charge. Yeah, it's kind of like you're both just going through this. I don't know it's a process together, and things sometimes work and sometimes they don't, and then you say, well, that didn't work. What else could we do? And yeah, it's a crazy. I don't know, when you're writing,
So you type like I do, right? So you're on a computer writing, not handwriting. Have you ever been reading what you're writing and be surprised by what you see coming up?
Not exactly in that way, but yeah, I'm surprised by what's coming out. I mean, I guess so. I guess the way you phrased it, that's kind of when the characters have taken over.
Yeah.
Or
yeah, I don't know. It's almost like I know I'm writing it and thinking it, and I'm the one that's putting it on the page. But as I'm reading it, I'm surprised, almost as though I didn't know that's what I had just written. I don't know. There's something. It's like there's two parts of your brain. There's the part that's actually doing the creating, and then there's the part that's like reading it and enjoying it. And they're two separate pieces. I don't know. It's very crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of flashing, for example. So, Miranda has a best friend, Ronit. She's helping Ronit kidnap Ronit's daughter. That's how the prologue. I'm not really giving away anything. And so there's backstory. We have to go back and explore how this happened. And all of a sudden, anecdotes about how Ronit and Miranda first met and something Ronit did to help Miranda. They just came out from my fingers. And wow. That they show so much about these two women and their relationship and why they would get to this point. And I didn't plan it. And it's wonderful. If only the whole book would write itself.
I know. I love those moments where it's just like, oh, wow. I had, so my third book's coming out.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And so I'm really excited about that. But when I got to a scene that I knew this is what needed to happen, but it was a very difficult scene to write. And I just didn't really want it to happen. And so I kept trying to come up with an alternative. And I didn't write, and I didn't write, and I didn't write, and no alternative is coming. And I'm feeling completely unable to even wrap, like, how am I going to wrap up this whole thing? It's just falling apart to pieces. Oh, what am I going to do? I finally wrote the scene. I said, fine, I'm writing it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? I'm just going to write it. And it was difficult to write. And when I was done with that scene, I was done writing for the day. I was like, okay, I'm that's it. I woke up the next morning and everything else like opened up. I knew where everything was going. I knew how everything was going to wrap up beautifully. It all fell into place. And I almost feel like my characters were saying, we told you, if you had just written the scene 2 months ago, this would have all happened then. But they were keeping things from me because I wasn't willing to write the scene for them. And they're like, we're not going along with you until you're done, So
that's great. Yeah. And the other thing is, it can be just as productive, as I'm sure you know, to write whatever 1,000 words and throw it all out.
Yeah.
And save 10. And that can be a very productive day. And it's hard to tell yourself that.
It is.
So I'm just trying to think if I had, in some of my books, I've had scenes that were very painful, like yours, and I didn't want to write. Well, this one, yeah. Definitely there was.
Well, I could feel, there were several scenes in this book that I could feel pain. There were several. Now, I don't know that they were painful for you to write, but they were painful for the character. And I felt her pain. So sometimes in those scenes, it's difficult to write them, at least for me, because I'm pulling up my own pain to give to my characters so that it's real. And sometimes, depending on what kind of mood I'm in, that can be really hard. But there were several times, I can't give it away because it would tell too much, but there were several times where I felt Miranda's, utter pain at what is going on.
Well,
there's a point with it. There's a point with a picture. There's a point with a picture. And yeah, I was just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So
well, thank you, because that means that my characters were real. They reached you.
Were.
I mean, that's the most wonderful thing a novelist can hear, or fiction writer can hear. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah, no, your characters were very real. I felt very connected to them. I felt very connected to both Miranda and her parents. Like I just felt the connection the whole time. I loved the book. I had no problem reading it. It was a lot of fun reading it. So this was your second novel?
Right. Second published novel.
Well, yeah. I mean, we all have the ones in the drawer, right?
Yeah. But yeah. So
okay. And what's number 3?
Well, I don't like to talk about books until I have a signed contract.
Right.
So I won't really talk about 3 and 4. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But
that's good. But 3 and 4 are out there, and you're pushing for them to come.
Well, 4 I'm working on.
You're working on.
And it was so wonderful to have this interview. It was an excuse not to get into this. The chapter in 4 that I'm working on is one that is hard to write, not having seen the particular locale. So it's, you know, it's hard. Because the other thing I was going to mention is I act out my character's actions. So if someone throws something hard and it shatters, I'm not going to throw it and risk injuring myself, but I am going to pick an equivalent item up, see how it feels to throw it, you know. So that's probably a bad example, but walking. I mean, I walked the exact routes in Washington and in New York, you know, that my characters walk. Things like that. I
often look in the mirror.
Yes.
And and like describe, like, okay, so I'm surprised, and I try to like look surprised and then look at myself and say, what's going on in my face? How would someone know that I'm surprised? What am I doing?
Yeah. Yep.
You know?
Or I move my arms, you know, my body.
And like, what would you call this? You know, like what, you know, she's doing this, and like, what would I call that? You know, and it's interesting. It's kind of, I think that if people were watching me in my office, they might actually try to medicate me, but that's okay.
Yeah. You know, you have to be careful. Like I said, that's the other thing. I was staring hard at cars on one of my walks because there are things with cars that I have to describe in a certain amount of detail in the book. And so I'm walking around the streets of New York, peering at cars, inside cars, you know, and, what would people think of?
And then pretty soon you got a cop following you because you look like you're about to.
Yeah. Well, then there's the cop scenes in the book too.
Right.
You know, going to the police station and taking notes and what the lobby looks like. You can't do all your research by watching Law and Order. No,
you can't.
Work.
No, you can't. That's true. That's true.
You know,
so what genre would you say I meant to tell you? What genre is that?
This is amorphous genres. Contemporary fiction, women's fiction, upmarket women's fiction. Those are the most common. Although I did get interviewed for a website called Chick Lit Central. So
it's Chick Lit.
The questions were fun. They asked me who would I want to play in the movie version for my novel, and I said, "Oh, thank you."
Thank you. Right,
Jennifer Lawrence, Channing Tatum. That's it. Miranda and Russ. Who was her mother? I'm picturing her in the movie about Queen Anne and the movie about her lost daughter, and I can't remember. Anyway, Olivia what? Oh, well, anyway, that was fun.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of, believe it or not, historical fiction, because they now say anything from 1970 back is considered historical fiction, which hurts my heart just a little tiny bit, because that makes me historical fiction, and it's a little hard. But
I get. And so there is a huge section of the book that I should do this. Indeed, takes place in the 60s,
right,
and very early 70s, as you said. I think it's misleading to call it historical fiction because people would expect the whole book to take place in the 1920s, 1830s. I don't even know.
Right.
So I don't call it that, but you're right.
It has an element to it. It's like My Sunflowers Beneath the Snow starts in the 70s, but comes through to present. And so, they've been labeling it sometimes as historical fiction, often as women's fiction.
I was going to say saga. I think if it goes through a stretch like that in the family, also, that's the other thing, which mine is also in the same family. It could be called a saga. It could
be a saga as well. Yeah. I think, that's one of the things I've found as an author that's really harder than I thought it would be, is determining what genre I'm writing in. Because I don't feel like I'm a genre writer. I write a story and then I have to look and say, okay, now which of these many buckets is it going to fit into? Yeah. As opposed to, I have a friend who's a cozy mystery writer, and she knows that she's writing a cozy mystery. Mm-hmm. And there are subgenres of cozy mystery, like the foodie ones, and if they're set at the beach, or if, and they have these different, so you kind of know when you get started. And with me, I don't know, I have a story and I write it, and then I sit and think, where are we going to put this one?
My stories, my novels, the four of them so far anyway, are centered on family relationships, focusing particularly on the woman, middle class, professional, but with a huge other component. I mean, my first novel, The Heirs, had a huge component, Holocaust related, second generation Holocaust, Holocaust guilt. This one has a huge component about social activism. Do we have a responsibility to the world to make the world better, to our fellow humans? So it's not just family novels, family drama. And that's important to me too, I guess, to have more than one theme, more than one train to the novel.
Right. Well, and I have the same thing in An Enemy Like Me. It's a World War II genre, but when you read it, you see a lot of the xenophobia, the fear of anyone who had a German past, who's living in the United States, and what does that do to communities and families? And people were changing their names in order to be more American, in order to avoid any kind of persecution for having German heritage. So you and I have some similar ideas, that we have this story that we're telling, but there are underlying themes that we're trying to push out there, so that I like people to think. That's what I enjoy. And I liked your book for that reason, because it does make you think. You have to say, well, what would I do if?
Yeah. I think it makes the book richer. And also, human beings, we don't have just one thing in our lives. We are not just, I'm a mom, and I'm a writer, and I'm a runner, and I'm a museum tour guide, by the way. And I'm many things, and obviously some are more important, than others. But we have a variety of.
We do, and I think that most people have something in their life that is very important to them, that they'd be willing to fight for, or that they'd be willing to talk about, or whatever. And so I like to find those kinds of themes and explore them, because to me, when you're reading, it's a very safe place to start thinking about things like, I don't know, racism, or other things that's very difficult to talk about in a public setting with other people, because people get very, they dig in their heels wherever they are, and they get very, I don't know the words that I want, but you know what I'm saying. And it's hard. It would be very difficult to have some of these conversations. But when you're reading a book, you can try on the different personalities of these different characters, see where you stand, see if you like that. Imagine what it would be if you had a different upbringing or whatever. And you can do things that you might not be able to do in a group setting with people, because you don't have the same fear of, well, what if they found out I had this thought? It's okay. You can have it. It's private. And you can try on the different characters. So
that's so interesting. Try on as if you were this character or that character.
Yeah, I do. When I'm reading, I'm always the character. Whoever is the one that is currently talking, who's currently involved, I am that character. I have become that character. I'm feeling what that character's feeling. And if I don't like it, then I'd like to pull back and ask why. Do I not like it because it's not my values? Do I not like it because it's uncomfortable? Do I not like it because they hit a piece of truth about me that I don't want to admit? Is that something I need to look at again? Should I reevaluate my life a little? Those kinds of things. I love books that make me do that.
I think that's fascinating that you really become the character you're reading. But can it be more than one character per book?
Oh, yeah.
You skip to whoever's the point of view.
Whoever's point of view it is. If they're written well, I can go back and forth between them. Every now and then there's a character that I can't become. She or he is so far removed from me, probably more in value system, that I have trouble actually becoming the character. But I can become very close to them, like almost their best friend, standing next to them, watching them go through this, as I want to scream and shout and shake them and say, what are you doing now?
I mean, the best thing doesn't happen to me with every book I read is when I continue the story after the last page, or I change it. I come up with new plots. Yeah.
Yeah. Or what's happened now? Like, what is Miranda currently doing today? We know what she was doing when we left her. What is she doing now? Those kinds of things. I love that. There were a few times now I was able to be Miranda without any problem, but there were a few times that I wanted to shake her. She goes and does something, and I'm like, "What are you doing?"
Good.
And because I was her, it was like I felt like I was scrambling backwards. Like, no, we're not gonna do this. So I love that in a character, because the very first character I tried to write, my very first manuscript, which will never see the light of day, the character was so perfect. I couldn't give her any flaws. Like, everything that hit her, she just had a perfect response. And it's a horribly flat, the concept of the story is not a bad concept, but the way I executed it was horrible. But I was learning. I was figuring things out. And so it's okay. But it's because I had her. I mean, she was like Superwoman. Everything that hit her, and she had horrible things hit her, and she would just come out looking like a shining star. And you can't love a character like that, because after a while you get to kind of hate her. Like, she's just perfect. Like, nobody's like that. I don't like her. I wouldn't want her as a friend. I mean, and Miranda was not perfect.
Yeah, I don't think I could write a perfect. Well, okay. I hope that I'm a good enough writer that I could write anything. So I suppose with effort, I could write a perfect character, but I don't know anyone perfect. I don't know what it's like to be perfect.
No. So I tell people, I think the reason that happened is when I first started writing fiction, I had just gotten out of a 14-year abusive relationship.
Okay.
And this was this dream that I had been afraid to do, because writing fiction is scary, because you're putting yourself out on this page. And if people don't like it, it's, it hurts, and you have to have a safe place to land. And I didn't have one of those. I was in this yucky relationship that, if I had been hurt on the outside as well as on the inside, I mean, I just couldn't do it. So I start writing, and I think I needed her to be this super person who, no matter what came her way, she was going to be able to battle it. And I think it was my own insecurities of like, can I be out here on my own, and can I be doing this? And so I wrote this character who could, and so I understand where she came from, but it is not a good character.
Yeah. So
it's not a character anyone would love. Maybe only someone who just got out of an abusive relationship could love this character.
And one thing I deliberately did with Russ, because maybe because I'm a woman, right? And he's the love interest for my main character, her fiance. And there's a tendency maybe to design the love interest as really handsome, because after all, I want readers to like and respect my main character and shake her sometimes. But
Right.
And so, well, you'd want to trust her judgment in who she falls for. So you want this guy to be good. So I had to deliberately make sure that he has plenty of faults as she uncovers his secrets, but
right.
from the start, he's not perfect. And what I deliberately did, this guy has a sweet tooth, man. From the chapter 1, he's eating his Entenmann's donuts, and he's got a little belly, and sometimes there's crumbs on his sweater. And I just deliberately did that so that he's not.
So that he wasn't this. Yeah, he wasn't this. 6'4", dark, handsome, gorgeous man who was perfect. He was like those people that we fall in love with, that have that, right? I mean, most of us fall in love with, an average Joe that has touched us in the right way, and that's why we're in love. And it isn't because it's the movie version of Average Joe.
Yeah. Right. Average movie Joe. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Ken, to go back to a recent hit movie.
Exactly.
Which, speaking of themes, the Barbie movie had a lot more to it than a Barbie doll.
Right. And I think
I enjoyed it. It was great.
I think that's what I love about literature is you can, if the author is a really good author, then you're going to get more than just a story. There is the story, and you can enjoy it for the story, but hopefully you're going to be getting more.
Not only that, to add to that, because I agree with you, and I said I try to have bigger themes.
Right.
I think if you write a really good book, even a good book, there are things in there that you didn't intend that readers see. And I want to say that because readers have said that about my book, and I don't want to say, well, I write really good books. But that's just another wonderful feeling when someone says to me, and I notice that, in the first chapter, he does this, and there's this a reverse echo of it in this other chapter. Oh,
I didn't know I did that.
Yeah. Oh, or something like that. Or
it is interesting, and it makes me think about my English teachers when they used to say, well, they made the curtains blue in this living room to signify, and as an author now, I think, or they made the curtains blue because they looked up, they had blue curtains in their own room and decided blue, and it just happened to fit the theme, or do you know?
Or, which is very common with me, because I'm a fiend about not repeating the same words over and over in the paragraph or page. And if he is wearing blue jeans, because that's what he's wearing, then I don't want to use the word blue in the page. And if I have to have a color, and I do want my curtains to have a color, I want my scenes to be vivid, they're not going to be blue. Right. And if we already know that something else has to be green or whatever, and
then you can't have green curtains either. Right.
So,
Right. And so sometimes it isn't because I was saying to myself, ooh, I'm going to create this scene that has this vibe to it. It's because blue was the best color choice given everything else blue. And sometimes it's literally, they're blue. Like I didn't even think about it. Just blue curtain came to mind, and that's what I wrote. And so,
and the characters, what color curtains would they choose for their house? Would they pay attention to the color? Everything. I don't know. Every word has such weight, and I almost. There's a lot of thought.
There is a lot of thought.
Goes into almost every word of my books, and more than people realize, and that's fine. I wouldn't want everyone to be staring at each word.
But it gives it the overall feel. When you're done, if you've thought about these words, then you have the overall feel.
Yeah.
Well, Fran, is there anything that you wish that I had asked you that I did not ask you?
I don't know. It's been great. I think so touched that the characters were real for you, and you wanted to shake them, and you felt, and so that's something. No, I don't ask anything. I appreciate your inviting
That's
me
it.
and you liking the book.
Super. So how can listeners who want to learn more about Fran Hawthorne find you and get up with you? I don't know, chat with you, be part of your world. How do they do that?
Oh, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. I do have a website, and of course, nothing is simple. It's Hawthorne Writer. So my last name, HAWTHORNE, then the word writer, WRITER. No dots, no underscore.
Okay.
HawthorneWriter.com. So that's
Super.
my website. And that also has a way to, reach me. And it's got, that's probably the easiest thing to go to. I mean, I'm on Instagram and Twitter as at Hawthorne Writer, and LinkedIn. And, but, I would love to hear from people. If you, of course, do read the book from your library, from Amazon, from Barnes and Noble, from local bookstore, I mean so much to hear what people think, including the things you didn't like,
Right. And review the books, like getting Amazon reviews really help us.
Yes. Goodreads,
help us.
Amazon. Yep. And honestly, 2-star, I don't care, just read it. Thank you. Let me know, because I learn from the criticisms, and a wonderful reader said to me, this book is much better than your first one. And don't you want to hear that you're getting better?
Oh, yeah. I had an editorial review on my second book that said that we can see such growth in Brown's writing, right? And it was like, oh my gosh, I've had growth. Yeah, there's something really wonderful about seeing that you're progressing in this field that you want to progress in, right?
Yeah.
So,
and you guys just read, read.
That's what I agree. Read. Everybody should read. And if you don't like me as an author, you don't like Fran as an author, find an author you do like. There's lots of authors out there. There's lots of good books. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for being on today, Fran.
Thank you, Terry, and be well.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.